All right, I want to call the business session of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission meeting to order here in Beaufort, North Carolina, on Wednesday, October the 18th. I want to welcome everybody. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Do we have any requested modifications or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, any opposition to accepting the agenda as presented? Seeing none, we'll consider the agenda adopted by unanimous consent. Next item is approval of the proceedings from our May 2023 meeting, which are in the briefing materials. Any corrections, edits, modifications to the proceedings? If not, any opposition to accepting them as presented? Seeing none, we'll consider those accepted by unanimous consent. At this point, we provide an opportunity for public comment. Any member of the public in the room? I don't see anyone. Anybody online that's requesting public comment? Nobody online? Very good. So we'll move ahead. So our next item is I'm going to call on Bob to present the 2024 action plan, and he'll be doing that in conjunction with staff. So Bob, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The draft action plan is in supplemental materials for the business session. The Administrative Oversight Committee has already gone through this once, so I think it's pretty close to reflecting the priorities that staff and the chairs of each management board and respective committee and others have worked through over the last couple of months. So I think it's a very close document. But what we'll do, well, the convention of this document is that the way it's presented here, anything in bold is new for this year. Anything in unbolded text is rollover or continuing work that we do each year or is a multi-year project. So I think focusing on the bolded text is probably the most important part here. And then as we have always done in the past, we'll have each senior staff member at the commission go through their goal and present the highlights, and at the end of that we can ask any questions. I think for goal one, what we usually do is Tony will go through all the high priority species projects for next year, and then we'll pause and then go into the medium and low priorities since there's quite a bit of information in goal one. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you're okay with it, I'll ask Tony to jump into goal one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The ASMFC team worked with the chairs of each of the boards to come up with these actions. We'll start off, as Bob said, with the high priority species, American eel. We have two addenda. The first is looking at coastwide catch for yellow eel in response to the stock assessment. And the second is to address Maine's glass eel quota, which expires at the end of 2024. For American lobster, we'll start work on the assessment that will be completed in 2025. We'll continue to update the indices, and then still a sort of holding pattern for the document is the management strategy evaluation. If the board does proceed with this, we'll have to, depending on the level of a management strategy evaluation, some of these can be quite expensive, so funding may still be a question mark if moving forward with this. For Atlantic croaker, we'll conduct the traffic light analysis, respond if necessary, as well as review and present the stock assessment. For Atlantic striped bass, we'll finalize addendum 2, which is the reduction in recreational and commercial measures. We will conduct the stock assessment update and present it to the board and respond if necessary. And the TC is going to work on developing alternatives for bag and size limit analysis for effort controls. And there is a possibility we may try to look into some season analyses as well if the board does direct the TC to do that. For black sea bass, summer flounder, scup, and bluefish, we'll continue to work with the Mid-Atlantic Council on the recreational measure setting process and framework and addenda. And the portion that we'll be doing this coming year with the Mid-Atlantic Council is conducting the public hearings for that document. And for bluefish, we'll be implementing the new management uncertainty tool in collaboration with the Mid-Atlantic Council. For horseshoe crab, we're going to set the 2025 Delaware Bay bait harvest specifications. We will work to conduct the workshop to evaluate the Delaware Bay management goals and objectives, and we'll conduct the stock assessment update and respond if necessary. For red drum, we're going to present the stock assessment and peer review. This is a benchmark and respond if necessary. And for scup, we'll be monitoring the management and research activities of the Mid-Atlantic Council on the scup discards and gear restricted area analysis. We do not actually conduct these since all of the GRAs are in federal waters, but we do follow along and help out when necessary. For shad and river herring, we will conduct and present the river herring benchmark stock assessment and peer review and respond if necessary. And that is all for the high priority species. I'll take any questions.
Yeah, Adam, I see your hand's raised online, so go ahead with your question.
We're going to work on unmuting you. One sec, Adam.
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you very much. I think there's one typo here on the black sea bass. The second bullet point, I believe, is meant to be separated into 2 and 3. I think the presentation of the management track stock assessment is a separate item. And the other comment I have is with regards to your comments on striped bass about potential board desire to look at seasonal analysis. Might it make more sense to change this third bullet for striped bass to simply read develop alternatives and analysis for effort controls?
If the board does add seasons, we could change it to that, Adam. We're waiting for direction from the board on that, though. That would be this afternoon.
Yeah, if you'd like to wait and then change it, I think that's fine. You know, my suggestion here was just to remove the specificity of bag and size limit, not necessarily add the seasonal part, and then just whatever the board comes up with, whether it's bag, size, season, or anything else, would seem like we're covered, but I'll defer to you the best way forward. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Adam. Any other questions for Tony? All right, move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The medium, low priorities, and just to state that this isn't that these species are have any less importance to the commission. This is about workload for staff and committees. For Atlantic herring, we'll monitor and respond if necessary to the activities of the New England Fishery Management Council, specifically looking at Amendment 10, which addresses spatial and temporal allocation and management of Atlantic herring at the unit level to minimize user conflicts, contribute to optimum yield, and support rebuilding of that resource. For Atlantic menhaden, we'll initiate work on the single species stock assessment update to be completed in 2025, and also continue to work on the ERP benchmark stock assessment, which will also be peer reviewed in 2025. For Atlantic sturgeon, we'll conduct and present the stock assessment update and respond if necessary. For coastal sharks, we'll monitor activities of NOAA Fisheries HMS, and if necessary, we will initiate an addendum to consider moving oceanic whitetip to the prohibited species group. HMS has, I think, already shifted this, so this would just be something to follow suit of what HMS has already done. For cobia, I should have brought this up into the higher priority species because the board did initiate the addendum to address recreational quota reallocation. So this will be a higher priorities. And we'll also collaborate with the Southeast Fisheries Science Center in the States to conduct a 2026 CEDAR stock assessment. For Jonah crab, we will work with our ACCSP and our partners on implementing and integrating the tracking data device collection as a part of Addendum 4. In northern shrimp, we will work with the section to develop a management action to consider implementation of an ongoing moratorium for shrimp until the resource improves. We'll also continue the development of a management trigger / wake up index to indicate when the stock could support a commercial fishery, so when to end that ongoing moratorium. For Spanish mackerel, we will monitor the activities of the South Atlantic Council, looking at the framework amendment addressing the ABCs, as well as work with them in conducting Spanish and king mackerel port meetings. And the committee will also develop, the TC will develop a white paper characterizing the recreational and commercial Spanish mackerel fisheries along the coast. For spiny dogfish, we'll present the management track stock assessment. And for spot, we will work on the benchmark stock assessment that will be conducted in 2025. This stock assessment is being delayed 1 year due to the loss of the lead assessment scientist for this species. We'll hear more about that at the policy board meeting. And we'll, for Tautog, we'll continue to work on monitoring the tagging program and the tagging study to look at the different types of tags. And for weakfish, we'll initiate the stock assessment update for 2025. Any questions on medium priority?
Questions? Anybody online? Nope, don't see any. Okay. No, move ahead.
So then lastly, I'm just going to go through the cross-cutting issues. First, we are going to continue to monitor impacts of changes to the MRIP program, fishing effort survey design, and data presentation standards relative to our FMPs and our stock assessments. We will consider strategies for increasing the responsiveness in our management plans to climate change and sort of thinking more about what can we do to make our FMPs more adaptable as we see species moving up and down the coast or east and west due to climate change. We will participate in the East Coast Climate Change Coordination Group to track the progress of the draft potential action plan. We'll provide support to the Climate Innovation Group to track information and challenges relevant to East Coast fisheries and identify areas that are worthy of consideration by the East Coast Climate Coordination Group and identify new possible actions to undertake in the draft action plan. And these are actions for all of the East Coast management bodies to take into consideration, not just the commission. And we'll also work with the Mid-Atlantic Council to clarify the roles that that we work towards when working on joint plans to try to increase the efficiency and collaboration for these projects. And this is really to put on paper how we work together as two management bodies. While we have a standard set of rules, they're not written down anywhere.
All right, thanks, Tony. Any question? John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tony. It might be covered in some of the points made, but I didn't see anything about socioeconomics in here. And it just comes to mind specifically for horseshoe crab, as we heard the other day. Of course, we deferred on allowing female harvest, and we heard from Craig Pugh that the females are worth more than the males. And one of the complaints we often hear from commercial fishermen is that we're always quick to take away quota and very slow to give it back. And I just didn't know whether it probably would come up in the different things that are done, but whether it should be a specific bullet that we will look at such issues for some of these species.
Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, I would suggest, for the socioeconomics committee, if there's a specific task or some guidance that you could provide to the committee or the Horseshoe Crab Board could provide, we could take that up with the SES committee.
All right, any other questions for Tony on goal 1? Okay, thank you, Tony. I guess, Pat, you're gonna handle goal 2? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Goal 2 covers all the fisheries research, stock assessment, and regional survey activities for the commission for 2024. So again, we've consulted with the various scientific committees, as well as the science staff, like the assessment science committee, the ecological modeling work group, and so on. Under the scientific committee activities, the first new item is to consult the assessment science committee for guidance on best practices related to the MRIP FES data and stock assessments. Specifically reach out to MRIP statisticians to scope the magnitude of potential effort and catch estimate changes by species. And then secondly, during stock assessments, conduct sensitivity analyses to evaluate the potential changes on assessment model results and stock status. Next, we'll solicit the assessment science committee input to the long-term stock assessment scheduling priorities, not just for the ASMFC schedule, but also our partners in the Northeast through the NRCC and through CDAR and the South Atlantic. Under the risk and uncertainty activities, we will focus on red drum as the next test case or test species for the risk and uncertainty policy and decision tree. That had been a focus on cobia next, but because that assessment will be a few years out, we decided to switch to red drum. That is planned for completion in 2024. And then finally, support a Northeast fish passage workshop to communicate and promote new innovations for improving passage efficiency. That's an idea that was brought forth by MassDMF and USGS scientists recently. Under greater data collection, work with the 3 East Coast regional management councils to characterize and address deficiencies in NOAA fisheries scientific support and evaluate impacts to fisheries, including exploration of industry-based platforms to conduct fisheries research and surveys. That was touched on earlier this morning. Also, a request from the ERP work group to increase the resolution of catch and survey information for future spatial modeling and stock assessments. That's relevant to ERP, but also stocks like striped bass, where we may be looking to shift to a spatial model. One of the outcomes or recommendations from the Jonah crab stock assessment was to explore the use of video surveys as a new fishery independent index. So we will work with the Northeast Science Center and other partners to see if that's feasible. Moving down to fisheries research, we will collaborate with USGS, New York DEC, and Delaware State University on a new project to develop sturgeon spawning stock abundance estimates in both the Hudson and Delaware rivers. In other collaborations with universities, a new proposal has been funded through Saltonstall Kennedy to conduct a striped bass management strategy evaluation. Again, that will have an emphasis on the spatial components of the striped bass stock and potential management strategies, and that's in collaboration with Virginia Tech University. Moving down to ecosystem-based management and changing ocean conditions. Promote consistencies in fishery independent survey data collection across East Coast geographic regions and jurisdictions, both state and federal, and develop data collection protocols to readily combine and use data and coast-wide modeling frameworks. Also improve coordination and knowledge sharing among the SSCs and the Commission scientific committees, particularly for species spanning multiple jurisdictions and jointly managed species. Another recommendation from the ERP work group is to examine options to increase fisheries management integration across FMPs in order to fully implement ecosystem-based modeling results. And then finally, support the recreational study fleet pilot project, monitor progress and respond if necessary. This is in collaboration with the Northeast Fisheries Science Center to look at hook and line surveys or alternative surveys due to the wind energy development in the Northeast. And in a similar vein, evaluate CMAP survey interactions with wind energy development in the Southeast. So I think that is all the new activities for Goal 2.
Thank you, Pat. Any questions for Pat? Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Pat. Like all good stuff, I just wanted to thank you for the little update to the risk and uncertainty section there, and that's mostly to meet my contractual obligation to say risk and uncertainty at each annual meeting. My more serious point is with the SSCs. I'm interested in that one, and I wonder, have you been thinking about ways to, I'm wondering what the mechanism is to like connect the groups, and so maybe you haven't thought about that yet, maybe you have, but I'd be interested to chat about that with you a little bit to help scope that out. But I think it's a great idea, and I think it could help with some of these cross-jurisdictional management issues, but also it's just always good to network like that just for ideas and things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. It's one of the recommendations coming out of the climate scenario planning activities. One of the favorable things is a number of your state agency scientists are on the SSCs, so there's some overlap already. But I'll pitch it to Tony for elaboration.
And I'll say that this is something that sort of we thought would be something that could be achievable in this coming year from our perspective. The NRCC or the Climate Leadership Group will be meeting in November. And so we'll have to see collectively if this is a priority for the councils, NOAA Fisheries and the science centers as well. If not, then it may be a little bit harder to achieve this, but there may be some mechanisms that we can do to try to take little bites at it if it's not something that's a priority for everybody else.
Yeah, thanks for that. So that's all awesome. I think I think you guys are probably thinking about Mid-Atlantic, New England, but maybe there are opportunities there's actually a broader SSC, collaboration that occurs. And in fact, it's going to be in New England the next time they all meet. I'm not saying that there's any way to kind of connect in with that, but there are these opportunities where all of the SSCs come together, and it'd be awesome if the commission could be a part of that as well, if there was a possibility.
All right, thanks, Jason. Erica?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And like Jason, I'm going to bring up the risk and uncertainty part, and I admit some unfamiliarity with it. I know you presented on it, but is there an opportunity to include, or does it already include, a sensitivity analysis to the MREP FES estimates into understanding risk and uncertainty for a species like red drum or anything else that would be considered through that? And if not, could we add that to the tasks?
Yeah, sorry, Erica. It was a little challenging to hear the first part of your question. If you could maybe repeat it, but I might pitch that to Jay if it relates to the risk and uncertainty decision tree.
So I'll try and go back. I had a gummy bear in my mouth. Thanks, Doug. So I was also wanting to bring up the risk and uncertainty part of the list, and I'm not as familiar with it as I'd like to be and probably should be, but I was curious whether it included an analysis of sensitivity to the MRIP FES estimates. I know that that was brought to light after the risk and uncertainty tool was developed. So as we move forward with that tool, I was asking if we could also incorporate, at that time it looks at red drum, looking at sensitivity to MRIP FES.
Sure, thanks. Great point. Thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on it. I think the answer to that is yes. So the way the current construct of the risk and uncertainty tool works is there are these, you can think of it like there's questions in there, and one of them is about the underlying data. And so where normally you might, if you have MRIP data, some commercial data, you would have some sense of the uncertainty around that. Given, this kind of new information that we have, that would probably change the answer to that and offer a little more, a change to how you would answer that and implement some sort of risk buffer to that. So I think there is absolutely a way that can connect in with the information we heard about. I think that was yesterday. So good question.
All right, any other questions for Pat on goal 2? Seeing none, we'll move on. I think our next one is goal 3, and that's going to be Jeff.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Goal 3 is focused on fisheries dependent data collected and disseminated through the ACCSP. The introductory paragraph has added reference to biological and social economic data as those have gained focus coastwide. The items under continuing basis represent the bulk of the staff workload and data activities to support the commission and partner activities, including the 11 projects that were approved yesterday. Under partnerships, we did highlight the role of ACCSP to coordinate regional recreational data needs and priorities as part of the recreational implementation plan developed last year, and is also an ongoing activity as part of the MRIP regional implementation and infrastructure. Under fisheries dependent data collection, it really highlights some software projects in preparation to develop modernized electronic dealer reporting application that would be better processing and implementation that wouldn't occur until January 2025, but the workload to get all the bits redeveloped, ready for both the online, mobile, and file upload portions to function takes a lot of work and coordination behind the scenes before it can be released. The next item is to implement expanded at entry quality control checks on the safest e-trips submissions for partner specific questions. That's automating a process that will tighten up the ranges of data that can be submitted and automate some of the manual and paper processes that occur still today. The other item that's exciting is the launch of the SciFish mobile application and project builder under the SAFES umbrella for standardized citizen science data collection. Under recreational surveys, we will continue to develop and seek certification of a for-hire methodology to use logbook to estimate catch and effort with dockside validation. The other item in process is to scope a pilot project to expand the data collection on discard data from recreational anglers. So the intent there is to make a modification to how MRIP collects the discard information. And if that pilot is successful, to then ask that to be a change to the core survey. Under data standards, distribution, and use, we've updated the Atlantic Coast data standards, but we really want to change how that is published to be a bit more of a searchable data standards on the ACCSP website. We've already provided a lot of the database driven standard code references, but making that a lot more accessible and maintained up to date instead of the historical PDF document. And under data distribution and use, we really highlighted the list of species where ACCSP staff have helped validate the data provided to the stock assessment process and keep things moving in those areas. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to goal 4. And, well, she's not here. All right. Bob will handle that.
All right, goal 4 is the law enforcement committee activities, essentially in compliance with the FMPs. There really are minimal changes to this section every year. It's just kind of care and feeding. The law enforcement committee monitors and provides feedback to the board as requested. In this section, there are some highlights about vessel tracking system and for in the lobster addendum and Jonah crab addenda for implementing the trackers that have to go on the vessels by December 15th of this year, sort of monitoring the progress of that. And then I think if you could keep scrolling, Madeline, I don't have the document open in front of me. I think that is actually the only specific change in this section. As I mentioned, it's kind of care and feeding and the continued activity of the law enforcement committee.
All right, thank you, Bob. Any questions for Bob on that? All right, if not, we'll move on to goal 5. And I think Pat, and you and Tony were going to tag team that. So I guess it's not really a tag team. So I know you'll do the best.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under goal 5 in the Commission's Habitat Program, as well as the Atlantic Coastal Fish Habitat Partnership, just a couple of new items. The Habitat Committee will be deciding on the next Habitat Management Series publication. So if you have any ideas for fresh topics there, please bring them forward. In the past, they've worked on things like acoustics or offshore wind impacts on habitat. And then the second item, if you could scroll down, please, is to support the Atlantic Fish Habitat Partnership in pursuing habitat restoration funding from the BIL and IRA acts or legislation. ACFIP has put in one proposal already for pretty big request, $25 million to do oyster restoration up and down the coast. There are several more opportunities through BIL and IRA, so they will be putting in more multi-million-dollar proposals up and down the coast. We'll see how they pan out in terms of those applications and success. So that is all, Mr. Chairman, under goal 5.
All right, thank you. Any questions on goal 5? Yeah, Lauren.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just above the leverage partnerships was educational issues. Could we hear a little bit about what might be involved in that, please?
Yes, thanks, Lauren. The Commission has a long track record of developing fish habitat outreach products. They can be anything from fact sheets on habitats important to individual species. The Habitat Management Series itself is another format for education. Generally, those go out to habitat practitioners, folks doing coastal zone management and restoration activities. But I think there's also, K through 12 educational level information. So it's a quick smattering of what that covers.
Yes, thank you for that. Has there been any assessment for the relative effectiveness of the various options that are included within the educational formats? For example, perhaps we should be seeking out nature centers that are directly adjacent to the coast and working with them to enhance education at those sorts of locations. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. The best I can tell you, Lauren, is there's a broad distribution list, again, for habitat practitioners. I'm not aware that it specifically covers, nature centers. I don't know if Tina might have any more information on that.
Lauren, we frequently get requests from nature centers for habitat or fisheries related information that we freely share with them, and we are always open to information or guidance on new information that they'd like.
All right, any other questions about habitat? Not, Tina, we'll turn it over to you for goal 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the goal on communications, outreach, and media support. There is a lot of continuing agenda items under this, but I will highlight some new focus in 2024 on the species that will be most prevalent, including striped bass, menhaden, horseshoe crabs, and continuing work on recreational reform initiatives with the Mid-Atlantic Council. Science staff will continue to work with me on developing the overviews of stock assessments, and there are quite a number of them for next year, including American lobster, croaker, herring, striped bass, ERP, and red drum. We also have started to work on, but we'll do more next year on developing a story map on striped bass migration and spawning patterns and the impact of environmental factors on recruitment. This idea came out of one of our public hearings on striped bass emergency action. We think it's a great idea, so we are working on that. We're also going to, as part of the website update, we'll create a page on best fishing practices and work to promote those, especially in, increasingly catch and release fisheries. Under new technologies, we will be upgrading and updating our website next year based on staff input and recommendations from the outreach survey that you all participated in. And the website is currently hosted on site, and we will look for opportunities to host that off site to increase security of our IT system and just simplify issues with maintenance. I will be working with Janita, who's our fishery science coordinator, to redesign and migrate both the NEMAP and CMAP websites. She's already started with CMAP, and we will be looking at potential RFPs or proposals for that. Under stakeholder participation, we sort of broadened the bullet on strengthening public input to look at a number of options where we could do a better job of putting out what we are looking for, soliciting information on, as well as gathering it. And under media relations, obviously an important component of this action plan has been responding to the MRIP FES design issues. And I will continue to work with the MRIP staff on developing messaging to better explain what those impacts are and next steps forward. And increasingly this year, we have been dealing with inaccuracies in media, and we will continue to work towards trying to correct those and get the commission story out there. And that's it for goal 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Factual inaccuracies in news reports. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Hard to imagine. Any questions for Tina? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to that subject, Tina, I was very surprised by the lack of response for some pretty respected news agencies. Have you had any further follow-up from any of those about those horseshoe crab articles?
You know, we were pretty assertive in going NPR. We did pursue their trying to get their ethics editor to take a stand, and we got a blanket statement saying, don't expect to hear back from us unless we feel strongly about it. So their editors feel fairly strongly that they are on the right side of it. So they're not contemplating working with us on changing their story. They did modify one story that had to do with confidentiality. So we feel like that's a minor win, but we still have an uphill battle with that.
All right, any other questions for Tina? Not Bob, goal 7.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Goal 7 is our legislative activities that Alexander and I engage in with the help of many folks around the table here. We appreciate that. Falls under really 4 main headings: partnership or relationships, legislation, appropriations, and partnerships. I'll go through them pretty quickly, but a lot of things in here are kind of ongoing activities that we do every year, engaging congressional offices and making sure they know the commission priorities and have our feedback on any relevant legislation that they're considering. But there are a few bold items in here that are worth mentioning. One of the things that we're willing to do is if you guys want to meet with member staff in your local districts at home. In other words, if you don't want to meet, go to Capitol Hill when you're down in DC for meeting weeks and you know some of the folks at home, or you want to get to know the folks at home that are in their local district offices, we're more than happy to reach out and set up some appointments. And depending on, if the member of Congress is there or not, we can even fly up and be part of that. Just let us know if we can help you engage with the local offices a little bit more than you have been. And then down under legislation, there's a number of issues and specific acts that we'll continue to monitor. Alexander mentioned a lot of those this morning during the briefing during the executive committee, but shifting stocks and reallocation and this idea of fishery disaster efficiency and improving that is included here. And there's the notion of recreational data issue that's talked about in a number of places in this document, as well as the NOAA Organic Act and a number of others. So those are all included here. And we obviously just anything, if new acts or other things come up that aren't listed here, it doesn't mean we won't react to them. We'll continue to react to them. These are the areas that we know right now that we'll need to work on. And under support for management activities, which is appropriations, we'll just continue to highlight the important issues and line items within the federal budget that each, that we always bring forward, essentially the Atlantic Coastal Act and IJF and NEMAP funding and CMAP funding and all the others that are listed there. And we'll continue to work on the partnership with USGS. It's highlighted in here in a number of places. They've been, I'd say, extremely supportive of ASMFC and able to provide and bring a number of scientists to the scientific priorities of the commission. And our partnership with USGS has been great. We've been able to get a lot of information. So we're going to move that and try to actually get some support and funding pushed into USGS to further support that partnership. And then, under partnership, it just, again, highlights the partnerships with Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS, as well as NOAA Fisheries and others. So those are the highlights of the legislative section. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of action this year, and there's, we'll react to it as we need to.
All right, Alexander, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yep. One thing to add with meeting with members in your districts is this is particularly important for highlighting legislation such as RAWA, the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, and showing some of the on the ground examples that funding can help support partnerships, stuff like that.
All right. Thank you, Alexander. And any questions for Bob? Seeing none. Last but certainly not least, goal 8. Laura?
Thank you, Spud. As you all know, Goal 8 is the ensure the fiscal stability and efficient administration of the commission, which is an ongoing process. And so there aren't a lot of new tasks every year. We do what we do. But under managed operations and budgets, we did add some tasks. One is work with member states to effectively and efficiently administer Atlantic right whales lobster congressional funding, which we've got 2 cooperative agreements right now for that. One for the 14 million, which is already ongoing, and then the 26 million, which actually turned into 56 million because of, we just added a second year. So I think that's a 4 or 5 year, and that's how the feds wanted to do it. Second one is assist member states in distributing fisheries disaster funds as requested. And Doug alluded to that earlier. We're happy to do it. We can do it easily and quickly. So I'm happy to help. And then complete distribution of remaining CARES and CAA funding and respond to audit requirements as necessary. The rest of the tasks are ongoing. Under manage human resources, I did add if necessary. They continue to refine the telecommute policy if necessary. And that's it.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions for Laura specific on Goal 8 or any questions about the overall action plan? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Laura, just curious, what is ASMFC's telecommute policy, since that is a big issue for all of us?
What is ASMFC's telecommute policy? Staff is required to be in the office 1 day a week.
But that is the basis. But a lot of staff are in more than 1 day a week, and we're kind of letting it go organically and see where we settle out in it. It seems to be working pretty well where we are right now.
All right, any other questions? As you can tell, it's another ambitious and very active year ahead of us. So I say tighten up your seat belts and get ready for the ride, because it's coming. So at this point, if there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2024 action plan. Pat Kelleher, a second from John Clark. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes by unanimous consent. Thank y'all. And we'll move on. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bob to talk about the 20 to 28 strategic plan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A draft document with a number of edits is included also in the supplemental material for this business session meeting. And I don't think I'm going to go through all the edits that are suggested there. That would be a little bit tedious and painful. But, you know, talking with Spud and Joe and staff at the commission, we've all kind of come to the agreement, or our perspective is that this document does not need a major rewrite right now. You know, the overall goals that we just went through as part of the action plan and the driving forces are fairly similar to what they were 5 years ago. You know, it's the core function of ASMFC is still pretty similar to what it was a few years ago. There are some changes that I'll highlight a little bit, but that's kind of the idea here. And the timing is, we're not seeking approval of this document today. What we would like to do is introduce it and hit a couple of the highlights in this document. Folks can go home and think about it for a month or so. We'll send out a reminder email to provide feedback to us on this, and then we'll bring a edited version back to the meeting at the winter meeting, and that's when we'll seek approval from the business session on this document. So it is a living document, and you know, the edits in here right now reflect conversations with Spud and Joe, as well as the edits from each of the staff members that actually just heard presenting the action plan. So with that, I'll kind of go through a couple quick highlights in here. A couple major themes that we've done is we used to say changing ocean conditions, and now we're just saying it's climate change. We're just being more direct about that. That's what we're dealing with climate change, and you know, we have to react to that. And the other thing that's woven in throughout this is the scenario planning climate change project that went on for the last few years. There's a number of recommendations that came out of that process that relate to sort of being more nimble and able to quickly react to climate changes in our management process. So that's those concepts again are woven in here in a number of places. And you know, we're not suggesting changing the vision or the mission at this point. Where there again, the situation really hasn't changed much. That, you know, as it was in the past 5 years. So driving forces, where we've maintained the main topics there again, but highlighting climate-induced changes and climate change. Things are happening quickly, and it's affecting essentially everything that this commission does in one way or another. So, you know, there's a number of species there that are examples of climate change and species that have been significantly impacted in their distribution and or productivity from climate change. We want just to highlight those species for consideration. At the end of that section on climate change, we've added a paragraph that is really reflective of the scenario planning process and some of the output of that we can continue to consider during this 5-year period of this strategic plan. The other driving forces are pretty unchanged: allocation, science as a foundation of our decisions, ecosystem functions, competing ocean uses, protected species. Those are all still, you know, key pieces of what we do, and whether we want to or not, we can't avoid them. They're going to influence what we're up to. And then, you know, increased collaboration among the states and our federal partners is obviously a key part of this. And you know, we've seen a couple areas where we've got some concerns over strained relationship between states and the federal partners in some areas. So we want to continue to work on those. The goals and objectives overall, again, we have not changed the 8 goals that are in here. We've adjusted some wording within some of the goals, but overall they're, you know, fish policy, fish science, fish data, and on down the line of outreach and law enforcement, habitat, legislative, and the financial and administration portion of this. The only thing I want to highlight within these goals is goal 8. You know, we had some discussion at staff, and this is the what Laura just talked about, the fiscal stability and efficient administration of the commission. You know, we don't have a choice. You know, we have to manage the commission efficiently. We have to do these financial, you know, all the grant processing, cooperative agreements, travel reimbursement, meeting planning. All those things are really non-negotiable. We have to do them. So we're considering making goal 8 much simpler and you know, very basic, and just sort of noting that we've got to do those things. So that's the only goal that we're consistent or we're considering making a fairly significant change to, but still capturing the concept that, you know, responsible administration of the commission is obviously critically important, but it's kind of a ongoing activity year to year, and there's not a whole lot of change within that goal. So again, happy to answer any questions, and if you guys know or feel there's anything that should be added or taken out, or you have comments right now, we'd love to hear it. But you know, I think maybe a month or so timeline to get comments back. We can process those and get them woven into a document for consideration at the winter meeting.
Thank you, Bob. Questions for Bob or comments? Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Bob, for this. I just wonder on goal 8, you know, we have these conversations around this table from time to time about, you know, using the commission as a bank, and, you know, you guys are, Laura's shop is magnificently helpful, but I wonder if it would be useful for you in order to prevent any kind of mission creep in being a little, I don't know if there's some sort of guardrail you want to put in there in terms of what sort of, you know, services you're willing to offer to, because you guys are amazing. Every time we ask for help, you know, you guys just step up and really bail us out of some tight spots. But at a certain point, you might find yourself, you know, unable to accommodate that. So I don't know if that would be helpful for you in the long run or not.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And maybe in hindsight, if there's another pandemic, we may treat any pandemic assistance very differently than we did this time. But no, I think it's good. You know, there is a lot of work there, and people have started calling us the Atlantic States Marine Fiscal Commission and taking out fish. So, you know, we'll think about that. I think it's a good idea to make sure it doesn't get too overwhelming.
Thanks, Lynn. Any other questions about the process? I certainly encourage you to dive into this and give us all the benefit of the collective wisdom. So Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask a few questions about word changes under the values, and I appreciate that this is all done in track changes. I'm of the general mindset that sweeping changes probably are not necessary at this time. So in the second sentence, it's changed to say that the commission is committed to the sustainable fishery management for the benefit of recreational and commercial industries, and it removes reference to anglers and harvesters. And I was curious if it actually is the commission's value to manage for the benefit beyond the harvester stage. The term industry seems like it could creep a lot further than the role and responsibility of conservation of our resources. So I wanted to bring that up for discussion.
Erica, that's a great point. The reason we made these edits was it didn't really include the for-hire industry before. It was just anglers and commercial fishermen, and fishermen maybe not the right term anymore either. So we were looking for something that was more, a broader umbrella to collect, to sort of say, all fishing activities, and we want to manage for the good of those. So if you are reading that as this appears to be too broad, and it's looking at whatever processors and dealers, or it may be extending beyond what our management ability and priorities are. I'm open for wording suggestions for sure, but that's the rationale why we made the change. But if there's a better way to say it, we're open for sure.
Again, that's why I encourage folks to take a look at it, be thoughtful about it, and provide some feedback, and then we'll have a chance to review this and discuss it further at the winter 2024 meeting. So no actions required on this at this point. So if there's no further discussion on that, I'm going to call on Bob to conduct the election of officers.
I detect some glee in your voice there, Mr. Chairman. So this is the part that Spud referred to earlier on Monday evening, which is vote early, vote often, I think is where we are here. But before I get into the actual election itself, I want to open this box. Present our outgoing chair, or that's what we assume will happen here, with a commemorative clock to, on behalf of all 45 commissioners and staff, thank you for the last 2 years. There you go. And most folks don't know this, but Spud and Joe and I have a conversation every Monday morning at like 10. And I don't know if it's a planning session or a therapy session or what it is, but it works out really well. And I miss those conversations with Spud. We've had a lot of fun with those conversations, and I think we got a lot done and really appreciate it. And somehow you were able to pull off all 8 meetings in person. The previous chair, for some reason, wasn't able to do that, Mr. Kelleher. But so you can be very proud of that. But again, on behalf of all the commissioners and staff and everyone, thank you for the last 2 years. We really appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you all very much. I've got some remarks I'll make tomorrow at policy board, a little more detail, but I want to thank everybody for the support and the honor of being vice chair and chair of this organization. It's a significant milestone in my life. I certainly appreciate it. And I do very much appreciate Joe and Bob's patience on those Monday morning calls as I would wax philosophical about the state of the world, the state of fisheries management, all these other things. Like you said, it was very therapeutic. It helped me kind of start my week off on it's kind of like, shaking up a bottle of Mountain Dew, and you got to ease the cap off if you want the liquid to stay in the bottle. So that was very important. So thank y'all. It's been an honor.
I should have said this earlier, but it's worth noting that, Spud is the first governor's appointee that's been chair of the commission for a long time. So he did put in all this time, completely as a volunteer. He wasn't part of his other job that he's being paid to do, and really appreciate all the many hours he's put into this. So thanks again, Spud. So with that, I will call on the chair of the nominations committee, Pat Kelleher, for a report on the chair nominations.
Thank you, Bob. And congratulations, Spud, on really steady hand on the wheel here and guiding us through, the transition from COVID back into somewhat of a real world. On behalf of the nominations committee, we have two very excellent candidates for chair and vice chair. Before bringing those forward, I just would like to thank members of the nomination committee, Erica Burgess and John Clark. We spent days and days talking about this. We were all tasked at reaching out to our federal administrative commissioners who in return were supposed to have those conversations with their governors and legislative appointees. Very clear based on the work of the two individuals that we have that we have two people who will continue to give strong guidance to the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to present our nomination for chair of the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission as Joe Cimino from New Jersey.
Thank you, Pat, for that report. Laura is going to hand out the ballots now. One vote per state. If you need to caucus with somebody who's not in the room, please do that. And then please fill out the ballot. Have one person from your delegation sign it, I believe. And then we'll round those ballots up and count off the votes. All right, the ballots are in. The accounting firm of Leach & Associates has counted them up, and it is unanimous, no write-in votes. Joe has been unanimously elected as the next chair of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. Congratulations. I will go back to Pat Kelleher for a report on vice chair nominations.
Thank you. As is customary, we always try to ensure that leadership is shared geographically up and down the coast, this being the northeast turn in line for the vice chair. And after consulting with the members of the nomination committee, we're pleased to nominate Dan McKernan as vice chair.
Thank you, Pat. And we'll go through the same routine. Laura is going to pass out the ballots and we'll collect them and count them up. All right, good. Thanks again, Laura. The votes for vice chair, again, is unanimous, and Dan McKernan has been elected as the next vice chair of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. Congratulations, Dan. And with that, I'll turn the microphone back over to our previous chair to close out the business session.
Thank you. Dennis, you got a comment?
Yes, thank you. Before you go any further, having been here for a long time, it was always my understanding that we rotated between north and south, whatever that was. This year, it seemed like we had a conversation, as Pat just stated, someone from the northeast, while Spud from the south is leaving. I have no interest, not interest, but concern about who we selected or about how we did it. I had, again, in my mind, I thought we were going to go to the south. And now we're talking about having three distinct areas, mid, northeast, and south, apparently. And I see that limiting some of the state directors to be given the opportunity to be chair or vice chair, because you end up in sort of you have to be around for 8 years. You get vice chair, chair, and so on and so forth. It takes a long time for it to rotate back, to the different geographical areas. And my thought is, is we should eliminate the distinction between north and south and mid. If there's qualified candidates from any state, I think that's who we should be selecting. If we think about it, there's really no good reason to have to go north or south. And you think of the problems that have come up in the past where you have a vice chair speaking Maine and you have a chair speaking Georgia, it causes difficulties. So I really think, I guess I didn't even get a laugh out of that. But I do think that we should formalize the nominating process and eliminate the need for making a selection from any geographical area. That's just my thoughts. I don't know if anyone shares them, but that's what my thoughts are.
I'm gonna let Bob sort of speak to that process.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis, for those comments. The most recent version of the nominating process and election process, as you said, does contemplate 3 regions, but it also, I don't have it open in front of me, but it states that as more of a goal than a requirement. And it says, the commission should elect the best persons for leadership, regardless of where they came, where it would state they're from. But, if available, we should try to, rotate through the 3 regions. So it does contemplate this, elect the best person wherever they come from, but, try to spread it out over the years. So I think some of what you said is woven in there. I can dig out the election process and share it with everyone, and we can see if it needs updating.
Yeah, if I may, where is that written down, that nominating process, and how did that come to pass that we went to 3 states?
I don't recall if it was developed by the executive committee or the full commission, but I know we modified that probably 15 years ago and really haven't changed it since. So it's dated at this point, but we can dig it out and share it with everyone, and we can put that on the agenda for the winter meeting, just to look it over and make sure it reflects what everybody wants.
Again, as I say, I have no real problem, but I'm just trying to think of how we would be better off if we didn't have a distinction geographic.
All right, thank you. So I want to conclude. We don't have a gavel up here, as y'all noticed, to pass on, but your newly elected vice chair felt like there needed to be some sort of emblematic transfer. So he's provided this very delicate bloom here, which I believe represents the new, which is Joe. And then I'm providing him this container of Fruit Loops as a reflection of what he'll be having to do over the next couple of years. So with that, you are formally anointed now as the chair. So, all right.